ever had like questions that are really difficult to answer? Like you hear the question and you're like bee's knees. Like, what does that mean? It's the bee's knees, man. I didn't know that till this morning because of the game. That's an idiom I have not used very often, nor have I heard used very often. But that's not what I would have guessed that it would have meant. But how about this? How about hamburger? Like, why is it called a hamburger? It's not ham. It's beef. Yeah, it's meat. Well, ham is meat too. But yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. Or maybe you guys have had a pet called a guinea pig. I don't think it's from Papua New Guinea, and I'm pretty sure it's not a pig. So, is that what? It looks like it's on an outdoor table, like one of those clear tables that have like the foggy crystallized type design in it. Or how about this one? Some of you enjoy this food, a hot dog. Well, why? Why is it called a hot dog? That's kind of gross. Like, is it because you eat them in the summer and you're like, man, it's hot, dog? Like, have a hot. I don't know. Do you know the answer? Oh, because it's all just the mixed up meat that's basically dog food. Okay, I can go with that. All right. Or how about this? How about this? Most of you are wearing this morning, thank goodness. But a pair of pants. What? Why is it a pair? 2 legs, but it's one item. Like a pair of shoes, I get, because you can lose one and be lost without a shoe. You can't lose one pant leg. No, that doesn't count. I knew as soon as I said that you were going to say something smart. All right. Or this is my last one. How about a butterfly? It's not a butter and it's not a fly. It does fly. Is it smooth like butter when it does fly? See? Maybe it flies carrying butter. So there are all kinds of questions that we tend to. Some of us, you didn't even think about some of those things before. You're like, oh my goodness, why is it called that? Like questions that are tough to answer. We're in this series called Do Something, and we've been talking about a lot of questions that are difficult to answer, like questions of injustices. Like, what do we do about injustice? There's all kinds of questions that injustice brings up when it comes to our faith, when it comes to our relationships. Maybe you've seen animals that have been treated poorly. You know the commercial? In the arms of it. It's got the animals that are like neglected. It makes you want to cry and like buy all the animals in the world. You see that and you're like, where's the justice in that? You ask questions like, who would do that, right? Like when you see like animal abuse stories, like who would abuse? I mean, cats, I understand, but no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I have 2 now, so you know I'm joking. Actually, one of them brought me a mouse recently, and I was like, "You're serving your purpose. You get to stay." So that's kind of nice. But injustice prompts us to ask questions, tough questions sometimes, because when we look injustice in the face, it's not pretty and it's not tolerable. So why does it happen? Or maybe you've seen that kid in school that gets bullied because of the way maybe their voice sounds, and you think to yourself, well, why would somebody pick that out and make fun of it? Because it's not like they can control that. That's just their voice. Or something about how they look. It's just, why do people do that? And then that prompts another question, like why doesn't somebody do something about that? Like have you guys ever seen, hey guys, pay attention. Have you guys ever seen like a teacher walk by when something like that is happening? And you wonder, why doesn't somebody do something like that? Or if like somebody gets in trouble for something in school and you wonder like, how come they get in trouble when this is happening over here? How about we get those people in trouble too? And you wonder about injustice. Injustice prompts questions that sometimes are pretty difficult to answer. So I want to do a little exercise. I want you guys, when I say injustice, I want you to tell me what you think of when I say injustice. So this isn't going to be like a raise your hand and tell me. This is just going to be a like shout it out. It's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of injustice. A dog eating a cat? I think that's just the cycle of life. I'm just kidding. Abuse is a good one. You said abuse. That's a pretty big injustice. Oh, what else? Racism. Sorry, I started in all caps and then I stopped, and I know that bugs some people, and I apologize. Cats are a grave injustice, but I think we covered that one. What else? Bullying, that's a good one. By the way, we talked about all these before, so if you want to go look on our YouTube channel about some of these specific things, we talked about them before. Shameless plug right there. What else? Poverty, it's a big one. What else? Scammers. Is that what you said? I like it. We're going to put that in the same categories. Scammers, that's, yeah. Same category. What else? Death. It's a pretty big one. We'll leave that in the same category. How about we say crime? Is that fair? Crime is unjust. This wire's like attacking me. Okay. What else? Can you guys think of anything else? Pollution. Yeah, you guys seen like the turtles in the Caribbean where they've got like the plastic around their necks because we're not taking care of the environment, throwing stuff in the ocean that shouldn't go there. What else? Oh, I forgot. It's okay. How about this one? That one, ringing any bells? Human trafficking. Slavery still happens today. It just looks a little different. At least on our side of the world. What else? You guys think that's a pretty exhaustive list. There's a lot of injustice to notice about the world today. There's lots of things that we see and we're like, don't like that. Nope, don't like that. Don't want anything to do with that. So some of you, when you think of these things, I want you to think about a question that one of these things brings, whether it's abuse, whether it's racism, whether it's poverty, whether it's slavery, whatever it is. What are questions that raises in your mind? I want you to turn the person next to you. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to discuss some questions that come up when these sorts of issues come up. Go. What questions does this make you guys think of? Why? That's an excellent question that people ask. Like, why? Here, I should have thought in advance. I'm going to actually do this just to make it easier to see where I'm writing. I should have written smaller if I had thought ahead because I knew I was doing this. Should have written smaller. But we ask, why? Oh, why would this happen? What else? What do you mean where? Okay, where does abuse happen most? That's a fair question. I get what you're saying now. Okay, so like, where is this happening and why? When is it happening? Okay, we can ask all those questions. What more specifically? What questions does this kind of thing raise? Why don't people help each other when it comes to poverty? Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm out of space, so I'm not going to write the whole thing, but that's good. We're going to put that under the why again. Why do people pollute the air that they live in? What else? What can we do to stop it? Anybody else have a question similar to that? What can we do to stop it? That was good. What was that? Here, I'm gonna write down what, because we got what? What can we do? Sorry about my handwriting. Any other questions you guys talked about? Stuff that this brings up? How could it happen? Is that what you said? God let this happen. Here we go. I'm going to put that there. Yeah, we forgot one. Who, what, when, where, and why. Did you guys ever watch Spy Kids 2? In the end credit scene, she's like, who, what, when, where, and why. Anyway, sorry. Nothing to do with, kind of has something to do. Anyway, so that's the ultimate question that we ask, right? It's the question that I brought up last week a little bit, but it's a question that many of us, we ask if we're honest, but we're sometimes afraid to ask it in church, is why would a loving and powerful God allow such injustices to happen? It has to do with who God is. That's probably one of our biggest questions. If God is so great and so loving and so powerful, why isn't he doing something about these things? Why doesn't God just stop abuse? Why doesn't God just stop bullying from happening to people who are vulnerable? Why doesn't God just eliminate poverty? We ask these questions. I think they're fair questions. Questions are good. They get us searching for answers. If you want to know why hot dogs are called hot dogs, then you get a good theory there. But you can just you Google it, you figure out answers to those questions, and you're going to get all kinds of answers on the internet. So you try to weigh those answers against, what we would use as like markers of truth, what we find in Scripture. Talk to people that you trust, and questions can cause you to search for answers. So when we ask, how could God allow these things to happen if he's so good and great and powerful? Well, then it prompts us to look for some answers to those questions. It may surprise some of you to know that it's okay to ask these questions. First off, it's okay to ask these questions because, like I said, they help us to search for these answers. But also, when it comes to this idea in this question of sometimes you can know an answer, but it doesn't feel true. You guys ever have situations like that where you may know intellectually the answer to something, but in your heart it doesn't feel good knowing that that's the answer? And so a lot of times questions related to this is, why does it sometimes feel like God is doing nothing? Because if God was doing something, why is this still here? And so the whole point of this series is, when we're talking about injustice, why don't we do something? Why doesn't God do something? Why doesn't somebody do something? It's this question about, what do we do in the face of injustice? And it's a legitimate question, but it might comfort you to know that these are questions that people have been asking not eternity, because we haven't, since the beginning of time, the other direction. These are questions people have been asking since the beginning of human history. And in fact, even in Jesus' time, people were asking these questions. Hey, God, if you're so good, why is this happening? Hey, God, if you're really out there, then why aren't you protecting us? Or God, if we are really your people, the nation of Israel, asking God, why? If you're really our God, then how come the Romans are oppressing us so badly? Legitimate questions. And today we have similar questions when it comes to these issues. So I want to take you straight to the account of Matthew, who is one of Jesus' closest apostles. He wrote down and was with Jesus all throughout his ministry. And he wrote down all these situations in which Jesus was performing miracles. He was teaching people. He was having relationships with people. He was the disciples being his closest relationships, and Matthew being one of those. He writes down all these instances and all these things that Jesus did while he was here. And Jesus said, he is God. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so Matthew's like, oh, this is good to write down. So he writes down all these things that God does through Jesus. And when it comes to this question of justice and injustice, people had the same kinds of questions. And so, first off, Matthew starts in this passage, Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 35. He writes this down. He says, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. So, we see that already as Jesus is traveling around, he's performing miracles and he's healing every kind of disease and illness. So what's this tell you about Jesus? right? It tells you that he obviously cares about these things. He cares about sickness. He cares about diseases, and he cares about people being well, so he heals them. It's almost like he's trying to make justice everywhere he goes. And so, but what I want you to recognize from that is what's noted in this next verse is Matthew continues writing in verse 36, and he says, when he saw the crowds, he had what on them? Say it louder so I can hear. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Now, this tells us a couple things. One, Jesus saw the injustice. When he saw the crowds, he saw the injustice. And what's cool is that he didn't just see it, he does something about it. So he doesn't just see the injustice. When he saw it, he cared. When Jesus saw the injustice, he cared. And he did something about it. He healed people. He performed signs. He forgave people, which was unheard of back then because only God can forgive. And so Jesus did these things. And it kind of, if you ever wondered, basically, where God is, I just want you to know God is pro-justice. God cares about the injustices in the world much like we do. And so for our questions, it's not for a lack of care that these things still exist. But if you ever wondered just like how pro-justice God is, we read Isaiah 61, verse 8. It says, "For I, the Lord, love justice." I love justice. I love seeing things play out the way they should. I don't like to see people suffering. I don't like pain. I, the Lord, love justice. But I think Jesus, when it comes to the why question, because this is all great, right? This is great. God loves justice. God, when Jesus was here, he saw people. He cared about them. He had compassion on them. This is all great. This helps us to have a better view and perspective on who God is. But it doesn't necessarily answer the question of why. Why does God still allow this to happen? If God is good and great and powerful, then why? Still the question. But I think Jesus answers the question in the very next verse in Matthew chapter 9. It says, when he saw the crowd, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So he said to his disciples, the harvest is great, but the workers are few. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. Jesus reminds us that there is a plan when it comes to injustice, and that plan involves you and me. There's lots of field to harvest, but there are few that ever stand up to do something about it. There are few that followed God to the point of being changed about it. Let me show you an example of what this could look like on a practical level. This is from Panama Beach in July of 2019. Check out this video.
It's extraordinary video as complete strangers band together into a human chain to come to the rescue of a family caught in a riptide.
The water, when it starts going around, there's nothing that can save you.
80 beachgoers rushed into the water and joined hands when they heard the cries for help. It happened on a beautiful beach day in Panama City, Florida, on the Gulf Coast. A young mother of 4 was enjoying a day at the beach when she saw 2 of her boys out in the water screaming for help. They were caught in a deadly riptide. Mom bravely swam to their rescue, but she got caught in the riptide as well. So did the boy's grandmother. Others tried to help. Altogether, 9 people were in danger of drowning. The chain started in very shallow water close to shore. It went on for 300 feet in water about 15 feet deep. Jessica Simmons was having dinner on the beach when she heard the cries.
I was like, I can help these people. I grabbed a man's hand, another man, I don't even know who they were, and I grabbed their hands and just pulled the last girl in.
You can see someone exhausted being carried out of the water. Bystanders on the beach erupted in cheers when the last person was rescued. Once safely on shore, she collapsed on the beach. Among those rescued was 8-year-old Stephen Ursey and his mom, Roberta.
We got caught in the current and, well, our mom had to go in after me and my brother and the people made a human chain and pulled us out.
As a mama, I'm supposed to be able to protect them and do everything, and I couldn't do it that day. I had to have help.
The boy's grandmother suffered a heart attack during the ordeal and is still in the intensive care unit. The whole family is forever thankful to all those strangers who formed a human chain that saved their lives.
Had we not done what we did, they would have drowned.
Basically, what I want you guys to get out of this is the reality that when it comes to injustice, and Jesus says that the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few, it's going to take as many of us as we can possibly get to do something about the injustice that we see in the world. Imagine if all of us locked arms. I'm not going to have you do it right now because COVID, but if we all locked arms and approached this world with a mindset of we're all in this together, and we all can bring life and hope to those who feel hopeless. We can face the injustice of the world. Think about what we could do to stop racism, bullying, poverty. If we stood up to people who are treating other people poorly, we stood up to crime, if we stood up to things together and said, actually, that's not acceptable. Because in our culture, what we've done is we've taken things that people used to say is unacceptable, and now we put them on a pedestal and we say, oh, this is great. It's the greatest thing ever. That we've taken away shame. We've said, oh, you could just be who you are and there's no shame in that. Whereas God says, actually, who we are at our core is sinful. And when we're sinful, we do things that we shouldn't do. And so actually it takes us locking arms and fighting for justice, fighting for good, saying that's not okay. And people don't like to be told what to do anymore, so it takes bravery. But sometimes it takes us locking arms. And what I want you guys to get out of this series, what we talked about, the first was God is opening our eyes to see injustice. Second, he's giving us compassion to care about it. And today, he's calling us to act and respond to it. He's working through the wrongs and through us to make them right. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. That we are God's answer to injustice. And what I want you guys to walk away from this week knowing is that God is doing something about injustice. God is doing something. When it feels like God isn't, when we're wondering, why would this happen? Where is God? Who's in charge here? God does have a plan. It involves us, and he is doing something about injustice. So one, I want you to start by asking God to help us change our minds. Retrain the way that you think. Instead of blaming God or blaming others, what can you do? What can you do to fight against injustice? What can you do by following God? And maybe that means asking a different set of questions, asking God to help you change the way you see him, because maybe you've seen him through a wrong lens, maybe to show you where he's at work and how you can come alongside him. Maybe it's to ask God to help you see more of what it looks like to follow him so that you can be aware of what it is that God truly desires for the world. Maybe it's to ask God to change the way that you see others, but you have to start asking God to change your mind. And then secondly, I want you to start by asking different questions. Instead of where is God, we can ask questions like, what does God think about this person or this situation? What are God's people doing to right this wrong? Who do I listen to in order to learn about injustice? What is God calling me to do to help? How can God use me? When we start asking a different set of questions and we start changing our minds, then there's a lot of damage that we could do against injustice in the world. And so I encourage you guys to think on those questions. As you guys get ready to go into your small groups, I want you to think about one injustice that you see and care about. What's one injustice that you see and care about in the world today, whether that's in your school, in our community, in our country, in the world in general? What's one injustice that you can think of and that you care about? I'm going to pray, and you guys will be dismissed to your small groups.